Sara Anne Wood was born on March 4, 1981, in New York, the youngest of 3 children born to Robert and Frances Wood. The family lived at 300 Hacadam Road in Sauquoit, a small, quiet, rural community in central New York. Her father, Robert, served as pastor at Norwich Corners Presbyterian Church, where the entire Wood family worshiped together. Sara grew up alongside her older brother Dusty, who was 17 at the time of her disappearance, and her older sister Nikki, who was 14. Those who knew Sara remember her as intelligent, lively, deeply religious, and full of energy. She had a genuine love of dancing and poetry, and she carried a warmth that drew people naturally toward her. Her brother Dusty would later recall that Sara was a devoted fan of country musician Dolly Parton and had a giving, generous personality that was simply part of who she was. Her elementary school teacher, Nancy Waldeck, described Sara as the happiest little girl she had ever known. Waldeck remembered how Sara's constant giggling was so genuinely infectious that it would spread through the entire classroom, leaving Waldeck herself struggling to maintain composure. Sara was extroverted and vivacious. She was not someone who faded into the background. She stood out in every room she entered, remembered by those around her for her bright blue eyes and her wide, unguarded smile. She was a daughter, a sister, a student, and a friend, a child fully alive in the world around her. Before August 18, 1993, that is exactly what Sara Anne Wood was. What happened on that date would change everything, for her family, for her community, and for the thousands of people across America who would come to know her name. August 18, 1993, began as an ordinary summer day for the Wood family. That morning, Robert, Frances, and their children had gone on a routine shopping trip together before returning home to their residence at 300 Hacadam Road in Sauquoit. The afternoon was quiet and unhurried, the kind of lazy, late summer day common to life in rural central New York. Sara had plans to ride her bicycle to Vacation Bible School at her father's church, Norwich Corners Presbyterian, located just under a mile down the road from the family home. Before leaving, she was in high spirits. She stood at the front door singing the Dolly Parton song, 9 to 5, a song her brother Dusty would never forget hearing her sing. She climbed onto her bicycle, called out to Dusty, "See you later," and rode off down the road. She was last seen at approximately 2:30 p.m., riding her bicycle up a steep hill on Hacadam Road in Frankfort, New York, close to Norwich Corners Church on adjoining Roberts Road. She was heading home after her religious classes. Sara was carrying a display board, a church songbook, and Vacation Bible School literature. At the time of her final sighting, she was wearing a pink t-shirt with the words "Guess Who" embroidered on the front, turquoise blue shorts, brown sandals, and prescription glasses. According to a confession made later by her abductor, Sara had dismounted her bicycle and was walking alongside the road, pushing the bike, when he spotted her. The location where she was last seen was less than half a mile from her family home. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the Wood family grew alarmed. Dusty received a phone call from his parents asking whether he had seen Sara. He had not. He rode home immediately. Shortly after, a neighbor came across Sara's bicycle hidden in the bushes on the side of the road. Sara had not returned home. She never would. Within an hour of Sara's abduction, her family knew something was deeply wrong. Her parents, brother and sister, became alarmed by her absence and reported her missing to police that same afternoon. New York State Police Trooper Timothy Blaze was among the first officers to arrive at the scene on Hacadam Road. What investigators found there told a troubling story. Sara's bicycle was discovered leaning against a tree several yards from the road. A search of the surrounding area revealed her coloring book and crayons hidden in an area of brush close to where the bicycle had been left. There were no signs of Sara herself. Based on the evidence at the scene, investigators rapidly determined that she had not wandered off on foot. She had been transported away from that location in a vehicle. A massive search operation was launched immediately. Over the following 5 days, state police, forest rangers, several hundred troopers, and volunteer firefighters combed dozens of square miles of surrounding terrain. Search and rescue personnel worked through the night in shifts, moving through dense woodland on their hands and knees. By the end of the first week, the search area had expanded to cover approximately 600 square miles of territory. Fresh crews were brought in from different parts of the state as the operation grew in scale. Sara's family took immediate and active steps of their own. They distributed missing persons flyers, searched their neighborhood, and pursued every available channel to keep Sara's name in front of the public. Bob Wood's small church was converted into a state police command post and served as the operational headquarters throughout the search. A public reward for Sara's safe return eventually climbed to over $150,000. More than 1,000 leads were received and investigated. Teal ribbons symbolizing Sara were placed in public locations throughout the region. The case was featured on national television programs including 48 Hours and America's Most Wanted, and thousands of missing persons posters were circulated across the United States. An entire nation was now searching for one 12-year-old girl from Sauquoit, New York. Despite the scale of the search operation, the national media attention, and the thousands of leads that poured in from across the country, investigators found themselves with very little concrete evidence to work with. The weeks following Sara's disappearance were defined by exhausting effort and frustrating dead ends. Lead Detective Frank Lawrence and his team worked methodically through every available possibility. They examined the surrounding woodland extensively. They questioned known and suspected sex offenders throughout the area, speaking with each one and eliminating them individually. They also interviewed those closest to Sara, her brother, her parents, the people in her immediate circle. Each was investigated thoroughly and ultimately eliminated. Every door that opened led to another dead end. All developments in the case continued to be relayed through the improvised command center established in New Hartford, New York, an operation that came to be known as the Rescue Sara Center. Updates were broadcast nationally as the search dragged on through the autumn months of 1993. Throughout this deeply painful period, Sara's parents, Bob and Frances Wood, remained publicly visible and emotionally resolute. Frances made a direct public plea to whoever was responsible for her daughter's disappearance, telling them plainly that she did not hate them, that she simply wanted her daughter back. Bob maintained a daily presence at the command post, offering encouragement to volunteers and investigators while privately carrying the weight of a grief that had no resolution. Investigators later described the uncertainty itself as the thing that kept everybody going, not knowing whether Sara was dead or alive, whether she was 1 mile away or 120 miles away. That uncertainty was both agonizing and motivating. By the winter of 1993, however, the trail had gone completely cold. No vehicle had been identified. No credible witness had come forward. 5 months after she rode her bicycle down Hacadam Road and called out to her brother, Sara Anne Wood had, by every measure, simply vanished. 5 months had passed since Sara Anne Wood vanished from Hacadam Road. Investigators in New York were no closer to finding her. Then, on the morning of January 7, 1994, something happened 100 miles away in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, that would ultimately change everything. A 12-year-old girl named Rebecca Savarese was walking to school that morning, passing through one of the busiest intersections in town. It was early 7:10 a.m., and a blizzard was bearing down on the city. Rebecca had her earphones in, listening to music, when she became aware of a man standing close beside her. She removed her earphones to hear what he was saying. He asked her if she could see the gun he was holding. She said that she could. He told her to do everything he said, and everything would be perfectly fine. The man attempted to drag Rebecca by her backpack toward his pickup truck parked nearby. Rebecca had already made a decision. She was not getting into that truck under any circumstances. Instead, she did something remarkable. She faked a severe asthma attack, gasping and losing breath as she struggled with her backpack straps. In the confusion, the man grabbed the bag itself while Rebecca slipped her arms free and ran. She fled to a nearby man clearing snow from a sidewalk, who immediately called police. A witness had observed the attempted abduction and followed the suspect's vehicle at a discreet distance, noting 3 digits from the license plate before the truck disappeared. Despite the blizzard, a Pittsfield police officer located a truck matching those digits sitting in a residential driveway. Officers knocked on the door. The homeowner explained that a friend named Lewis Lent had borrowed the truck. Lent himself was sitting in the kitchen when police walked in. A search of the vehicle produced Rebecca's backpack, a loaded revolver, duct tape, a knife, rope, candy, and a pair of children's sunglasses. Investigators described the collection plainly as an abduction kit. Everything a predator needed, kept ready and within reach. Lent denied any involvement but agreed to accompany officers to the police station. A teletype detailing the attempted abduction, the victim profile, the circumstances, the method was circulated to law enforcement departments across the region. When it reached the New York investigators who had spent 5 months searching for Sara Anne Wood, the similarities were immediately and unmistakably apparent. To virtually everyone who knew him, Lewis Stephen Lent Jr. appeared to be an ordinary, decent man. He worked as a janitor, most notably at a movie theater in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where his employer regarded him as a mentor figure to the young people who frequented the establishment. Children who knew him called him Big Brother. He was a familiar, welcomed presence in their lives. Beyond his work, Lent presented himself as a man of genuine community spirit. He helped a legally blind neighbor with extensive foundation repair work, spending hundreds of hours on the project entirely without compensation. He attended Bible school and was described by the dean of students there as a gentleman, unassuming, intelligent, and always ready with a handshake or, if you were not careful, a bear hug. His employer at the theater, who worked side by side with him for 6 years, later struggled openly to identify any moment that might have warned him of what Lent truly was. The search of Lent's home in North Adams told an entirely different story. Beneath the house, investigators discovered an intricate hidden chamber in the process of construction. Lent confessed that he was building this space with a singular purpose: to restrain and abuse future victims, primarily females between the ages of 12 and 17, whom he intended to hold captive and access whenever he desired. Because the chamber was not yet complete at the time of his arrest, he stated that victims kidnapped in the interim would be used for what he himself called quickies before their murder. Retired FBI agent and profiler Julia Cowley, who reviewed Lent's background and confessions at length, concluded that his outward helpfulness was not genuine. It was strategic. It was a deliberate method of building trust and manipulating those around him. Investigators who spent years interviewing Lent in prison observed that he understood emotions intellectually but did not experience them himself. He expressed regret that the murders had ruined his life, his own life, without any apparent regard for the lives of those he had taken or the families he had devastated. When New York detective Frank Lawrence arrived in Pittsfield in the hours following Lewis Lent's arrest, he came prepared. He brought a photograph of Sara Anne Wood and placed it in front of Lent during questioning, making clear exactly why New York investigators were there. Lent's reaction was flat, expressionless, but Lawrence was not deterred. He and his colleagues had a strategy, and they were prepared to be patient. Knowing that Lent had stated religious beliefs, investigators at one point brought a Bible into the interrogation room and placed it on the table between them. Whenever Lent's account wandered or deflected, they returned to it, pressing him quietly and persistently to tell the truth. Over the course of multiple interrogation sessions, the strategy began to work. Lent started to talk. His first confession concerned 12-year-old James Bernardo, a boy from Pittsfield who had vanished on October 22, 1990. Lent described encountering Bernardo outside the movie theater where he worked, offering the boy $5 to help move chairs inside. Once Bernardo was inside the building, Lent overpowered him, binding his hands behind his back at knife point. He drove the boy to his home, where he restrained him by both his wrists and ankles. The following morning, Lent drove the blindfolded boy to a remote woodland area in Newfield, New York, where he strangled him to death using a length of rope. Bernardo's body had been discovered by hunters several weeks after his disappearance. The duct tape used in the crime-matched tape recovered from Lent's vehicle at the time of his arrest, a direct corroboration of his confession. Lent then turned to Sara Anne Wood. He described encountering her on Hacadam Road, walking alongside her bicycle. He dragged her into his van at knife point, bound her hands, and drove to the Adirondack Mountains. There, he sexually assaulted her before bludgeoning her with a tree branch as she begged for her life. He claimed to have buried her body in a shallow grave near Raquette Lake, close to the town of Inlet, stating he could still see his van from the location where he buried her. What made his confession credible was what he knew. Lent described details about Sara that had never been released to the public, that her bicycle chain was broken, and that the bike was slightly too large for her. Detective Lawrence later confirmed both details were accurate. Lewis Lent knew things that only the killer would know. Following Lent's confession, he agreed to draw a hand-drawn map indicating where he claimed to have buried Sara's body. a location near Roquette Lake and Blue Mountain Lake in the remote Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York. Within hours of receiving that map, law enforcement agencies from across the state mobilized and dispatched personnel to the area. What followed was one of the largest searches for a missing child's remains in New York State history. More than 100 state troopers, officers from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Police, and over 50 personnel from Griffith Air Force Base converged on the Adirondack wilderness. Search and rescue dogs were brought in. Heavy excavation equipment was deployed. Civilian volunteers joined the effort in significant numbers, preparing meals from food donated by local businesses and transporting supplies to searchers in the field. Conditions were brutal. Temperatures dropped to 30 below zero, and snow was so deep and dense that search personnel could only remain outside for 20-minute intervals before being rotated back to shelter. Sara's father, Bob, and her brother Dusty were present throughout the search. They transported sandwiches, beverages, and equipment from storage facilities to the search locations day after day, holding on to the hope that Sara might finally, after everything, be brought home. The search lasted over 50 days. It found nothing. Lent subsequently recanted his claim that Sara was buried near Roquette Lake. Investigators later established that his original account was factually impossible. Financial records confirmed that Lent had cashed a check in Pittsfield at 6:18 p.m. on the day of Sara's abduction. The timeline simply did not allow for him to have abducted Sara at 2:30 p.m., driven to the Adirondacks, buried her body, and returned to Pittsfield in time. Upon recanting, Lent refused to disclose the actual location of her remains, claiming he had buried another victim in close proximity whose body he did not want discovered. In 1996, Lent pleaded guilty to the abduction and murder of both James Bernardo and Sara Anne Wood. He received a life sentence without parole for Bernardo's murder and a concurrent term of 25 years to life for Sara's. At sentencing, he ignored final personal pleas from Sara's family and a direct request from the presiding judge to reveal where her body lay. In the aftermath of Sara's disappearance, her family made a decision that would define the years that followed. Rather than retreat from public life, they channeled their grief into action. They founded the Sara Anne Wood Rescue Center, an organization dedicated to keeping the issue of missing and exploited children visible and supported. That center later merged with and became the Mohawk Valley branch of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, located in Utica, New York. The facility specializes in the preparation and distribution of missing child posters and remains, to this day, the only geographically targeted missing child poster distribution center in the entire United States. The numbers that have come out of that center are significant. By 2017 alone, its efforts had directly contributed to the safe recovery of 399 children nationwide. By 2018, the branch had circulated over 10.5 million missing children posters across the country and had assisted in the recovery of more than 7,500 of the approximately 11,000 children it had represented. One family's response to an unimaginable loss had grown into something that was measurably saving lives. On National Missing Children's Day in 1995, Sara's father, Bob, and her 19-year-old brother, Dusty, joined 5 other cyclists on a symbolic bike ride from Utica to Washington, D.C., organized specifically to raise awareness of the Sara Anne Wood Rescue Center and the broader cause of missing children. 2 years later, 43 cyclists replicated the ride. That event has since grown into the annual Ride for Missing Children, now a major yearly gathering in upstate New York attended by thousands of participants. Each rider wears a jersey in Sara's favorite colors of teal and pink, with white representing all missing children nationwide and purple as a tribute to law enforcement. Riders stop at schools along the route to deliver messages of child safety education. Many wear a pin bearing the name or image of the child they are riding in honor of. The inscription on the backs of their jerseys reads, "Making our children safer, one child at a time." The impact of Sara's case extended beyond the ride itself. In the decade following her abduction, annual reports of child abduction in New York State decreased by 30%. A tree was planted in her honor at Sauquoit Valley Middle School, and in 1999, the year Sara would have graduated from high school, her classmates installed a plaque in front of it. As of 2025, Sara's body has never been found. Lewis Lent remains incarcerated. Her family continues to hold on to the hope that she will one day be located and given a Christian burial close to the people who loved her. Dusty Wood has said he chooses not to spend his days consumed by anger toward the man responsible. Instead, he devotes his energy to positive things, to the ride, to the cause, and to the memory of a girl with bright blue eyes who once stood at a front door singing Dolly Parton and called out to her brother, "See you later."